I have this 3-step process for anyone who's interacting with really anything. I use it for cannabis, but it works for anything that can allow you to ensure that every time, I'll use cannabis again as an example, every time you sit with cannabis, you know that you're doing so consciously, you know that you're going to gain something from the experience, and you know that you're going to be able to have a process to integrate it into daily life. Because I'm a firm believer that these plant medicines, you don't need to go have more medicine to have a better life. I'm a firm believer that not everyone is meant to interact with psychedelics. Not everyone is meant to interact with cannabis. You don't need to interact with these medicines to have an amazing life. There's certain people that happen to vibe well with these plants and they sit with that. So for anyone listening, I'm not telling you have to interact with cannabis. You don't, right? I know plenty of people that don't interact with cannabis and they have fucking awesome lives, right? But at the same time, if you are someone that likes these plants, with great power comes great responsibility. And so what they're really meant to do, as I've figured out, is show you glimpses of what your life could look like without all the challenges and programs and patterns you might have running, limiting beliefs, all these things. And then it's your job to figure out the how. So they'll show you the what, right? This is what could happen in your life. But then that week after, that month after, that year after that you're integrating, that's when you actually have to figure out the how. So to give an example, maybe you sit with cannabis and you have an intention, right? Because that's the number one step in this process is intention, and then creating a ceremony where you actually give the plant a direction. And I have a little bit more, I can go into this later, but cannabis is a feminine medicine. So it's not the plant's job to figure out why you're sitting with it. That's your responsibility, right? That's part of the great responsibility part, where if you don't set an intention, well, what are you even sitting with the plant for? You're using a substance and not a medicine. And neither one is bad or good. It's just important to know the distinction. I'm not saying you can't just interact with cannabis for fun. You can do whatever you want, right? We're all sovereign beings. But for me personally, I teach people how to use it as a medicine and as a teacher. And so in that specific doctrine, what I teach people is that the intention supplies the direction for the experience. And then the ceremony is the container you set for that direction and intention to play out within. And I can give some examples of that. But the second step to that is then you're going to be able to surrender. And surrender is a term that kind of gets people a little puckered, because they're not exactly it's a scary term, right? Surrender. It's like letting go of control is scary, but it's much scarier if you don't know what you're surrendering for, why you're surrendering, or what might come up. So to give an example, maybe you set an intention to release emotion, right? Or maybe even you set an intention to feel happiness. Now, if you understand that cannabis works as a teacher of medicine, then what might happen is you set an intention for happiness, and then a lot of dark thoughts start coming up, right? So if you understand how this plant works and you understand surrender, then you might realize, okay, I might be feeling these thoughts because this is standing in the way of me actually being able to create happiness in my life. So now you know that you're surrendering for something, versus you hit a bag of a volcano at a party, you're having fun, and all of a sudden you start getting a cold sweat and you're like, what's happening, right? That's really hard to start surrendering into because you didn't expect that to happen.
Yeah.
Once you set an intention, you know that anything is possible, right? That's why the second step is surrendering. And really in surrendering, you unlock all of your creative potential, because your creative potential is held up by these limiting beliefs, by these disempowering stories you're telling yourself, by these programs and patterns that were instilled in you by society. And so as you're surrendering, you're unlocking a lot of your creative potential. And then once you do those two steps, take your power back by creating intention and having a ceremony, and unlocking your creative potential by surrendering, you can then move to the third step, which is becoming unstoppable, which is all about integration. So to go back to this example, maybe you sit with cannabis and you realize that wow, maybe you make an intention that's I want to feel why I'm not feeling fulfilled at the end of the day. It's hard to relax. Why am I feeling this? And so then you have this experience and you start laughing. You're like, wow, I really want to paint. I loved painting as a kid. And, I've got so busy that I haven't had time. So you're getting this awareness, right, of something that is like an Easter egg, right, of something that might give you this fulfillment. What a lot of people do, though, they have this experience, they go back to their daily sober reality, they don't make any changes. And then the next weekend, they're like, I just want to feel that feeling again. So that starts the cycle of dependency, right, with these plants and these medicines. And so instead, what you could do is, after you come out of this experience, you start looking up paint classes, right? You find one local to your area, you sign up, you end up going, you have a blast, right? You end up continuing to go, you meet friends there. One time the instructor's sick, he's like, can you fill in, right? You start teaching classes, and all of a sudden you're starting to now become the artist you've always wanted to become. That is you figuring out the how and integrating. And so It's a long-winded answer, but like that's why I use cannabis and the frequency I use it. And those are some steps to ensure that anyone listening, no matter how much you're choosing to use cannabis, because there's no right or wrong objective answer to this, but that process ensures that you're interacting with it consciously. Because I feel the only important thing is not how much you use it, how much you don't use it, any of these things. This is just my personal way of using it, but it's to ensure it's conscious, because that's how you're really going to get a higher quality of life from these medicines and teachers, rather than using it as a substance, which, hey, might give you some great feelings, but it's not going to be able to give the insights that using it as a medicine or teacher will.
I love that. That's just so important. Intention is the big takeaway word, is bringing it to your conscious awareness rather than just automatically, whatever, either vaporize it or smoke it or whatever you do with it. And it's like a cup of coffee, rather than automatically, because you're in the habit of just making a coffee every morning, really become conscious.